another thing you and I share, you are a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen.
That is true.
And I want to read you something. A fistfight broke out in the courtroom. They had to drag Johnny's girl away. His mama stood up and shouted, "Judge, don't take my boy this way." What does that mean to you? What does that bring?
It brings so much. Bruce Springsteen, to me, speaks for the everyman. He speaks for those who haven't received the American dream. You know, that disconnect between the dream and the reality. And Johnny 99, that song, I think in there he says, I had debts no honest man could pay. And the trial, and there's a public defender, and it's the story of what we live every day. And I will say, when I was in private practice, the people that hired me were mothers. And so I have this connection to mothers who would come to me, cry, "Please help my boy." And typically it was a boy. And so that song is very meaningful to me. I think of it a lot. "Don't take my boy that way," and "Mean Judge Brown," and all the things that stand between freedom and goodness and despair is wrapped up in that mother's plea. And it's kind of funny. I have great relationships with the mothers of my clients. They still email me cases I lost, kids doing 5 life sentences. And when I had my own son, they bought me presents, just randomly. And I still have this quilt that a mother made whose son I represented, we lost, and he died in prison. I still have that. And, it's very meaningful to me. And, my son doesn't understand now, he's 12. But when he has children, this is from a mother whose son was lost. It's very meaningful.
For you, being a lawyer is a lot like being a mother.
Yes.
And it's about that unconditional love.
True. No matter what they've done.
No matter what they did.
No, that's right.
And it's an opportunity
to show compassion in a harsh world and be smarter than the judge and the prosecutors. I still might lose. Work really hard for it, though, because I'm for this guy. A lot of times when I was doing capital work in federal court, we would have hearings. And I remember the first time I went in, it's the big federal court. There's me and my guy. And they have 2 attorney generals, a paralegal, an investigator, and some interns. And I remember thinking, it's not a fair fight, because I'm going to kick their ass. I was like, I don't care how many people you bring.
Because it is true that there probably is not a more powerful thing in this world than the love of a mother.
That is true. And that power, your client knows it. When they see it, they know it. And I remember one case I had, he had gone through 9 lawyers, gotten rid of all of them. So they called me, I was like, oh, okay. And he was ultimately executed, but before he died, he sent me this picture that he had a friend draw in prison. It's a big dragon, and it says Maselli, the dragon slayer. I'm also in a bikini, but it doesn't look anything like it. But I wrote him, I said, I'm so sorry, we lost that last case. I really am not sure what more is going to go on. He goes, it doesn't matter. All along you fought for me. It doesn't matter. And I think that's a lot of it. Even when you lose, if they know that you cared and that you tried, that's more than they might have had in their entire lives.
How many clients have you lost to execution?
7.
What's that like?
I would say the first time was the hardest. I did the visit. You can visit between 3 and 3:30, and they're executed at 6. And I went to see him, and he was drawing, and we talked like we would see each other again. We didn't talk about what was going to happen. He loved the TV show Friends. I said, I thought you didn't have TV on death row. He goes, oh, I rigged my radio so I can listen to it. And it was they have this room right outside the execution chamber where they have a shower, and then this room with really mesh. So it's really hard to see in there. And it's very quiet. They serve like lemonade. It's very weird. And I could hear them whispering, the guards, and they said, well, he doesn't have a spiritual advisor, so if you'd like to stay from 3:30 to 4, you can. I said, okay. And so I stayed that first hour, and I told him, I was real sorry. And he goes, no last minute deals? And I said, if I had something, I wouldn't have waited till today. And it was really hard. And I remember leaving and knowing what was going to happen, but I couldn't stay. Like I thought, like my original plan was to, wait for the time. But when I got out of there, I just got in my car. It was the craziest thing. And I drove, and I went to the Woodlands Mall, and I had a watch, and I knew he was going to be executed at 6, and it was the craziest thing. I just started shopping, like it was this, like I couldn't pull my credit card out fast enough. It was like I had to fill something, like I needed something, and I kept looking at my clock, watch, 6:01, 6:02. At 6:17, I remember standing in the ladies' room at Foley's, bawling my eyes out, because I knew it was over. And I felt like a heel for not staying. I felt like a failure for losing. And I felt like, his mother had called me that day and said, I don't know how they can execute him. There's no evidence. And, I didn't want to get into this big debate with her about all the evidence, including his 3 confessions. I just said, I'm sorry. And so that was the hardest. And I made a decision then, I can't go anymore. I can't go anymore. And I don't know if I became more callous, but it is interesting. After that, my son was a little baby, maybe a year or 2. I remember thinking, okay, this is who I have to save. I'm going to work and save these guys, but I got to think about this boy, and I can't come home like this. And so I don't want to say it got easier, but I became a little bit more detached. Like I did what I had to do and said my goodbyes, but I never went again. And I can't go again. I just can't.
I think it's a very difficult system that we work in, and I think it's difficult for us. And surely it's difficult for even judges and prosecutors too. I mean, it's difficult. The fundamental question is what is to be done when something horrible happens, when someone is hurt. In the song Jani, that store clerk was dead, and Jani did it through this storyteller, the songwriter. We know these things. We don't always know these things in real life, but we know it in case of the song. And the mother's upset, and the girl had to be taken out of court. And Jani 99, what's to be done? There's just this tension all through that song. And there's this tension that I hear when you tell that story. it takes an emotional toll.
Oh, it does. And I do believe it takes an emotional toll on every party. In fact, in the book Dead Man Walking, I read that when I was in law school. Sister Helen wrote that the price everyone pays for execution, whether you believe in that or not, but you ask young people to strap down a person to be executed. I have toured the execution chamber, and when I worked at the Court of Criminal Appeals, they just took us all on a tour. So we went and toured it, and you go in the room where people had lied and been executed. And I said to a guard, I said, "Were you here when they executed Carla Faye Tucker?" Because it was right after the execution. And he started weeping. He goes, "Yeah, I had the left leg." And you realize this is a boy, 19. They asked him to carry this woman in and strap her leg down. That's his legacy. What do you do? Well, I'm left leg. And I strapped the left leg down.
It takes a toll on even him.
Oh.
So I'm talking about the judges and the prosecutors, but think about all of the TCJ employees.
Right. And we were given a tour by the assistant warden at the time. And he was a very interesting man. And so someone said, "Well, what do you think about capital punishment?" He goes, I don't know. He goes, "I don't know if it deters crime. I don't know if it brings some sort of illusory closure." He goes, "But these are people too. You know, and this law says they'll pay a price, and I do my job." But then he had his glasses on and took them off, and I saw him. He goes, "They pay the price." So everyone, you know, the victim's family, if it brought closure and peace, that might be meaningful, and perhaps it does. And in all the horror of murder and execution and what we're a part of, that could be the only hope. That the victim's family would feel better. But 20 years down the road, it's hard. I understand why people get angry at the system, but it takes a long time to do it right, you know?
So, and that's part of the reason why you're here, is a case like that.
Mm-hmm.
One day, you get a call from Sister Helen, and she says,
Well, first, my secretary, Irma, said, "It's Sister Helen Prejean on the phone." I said, "From the movie?" I was like, "What?" And I get this random call, and she got my name from somebody who had told her no, and somebody had told that person no, you know, and she wanted me to help this woman, Kathy Henderson, who was scheduled for execution. And I was a single mother. My son was 4.5, 5. I said, "Well, sister, I can't. You know, I just can't. I live in Houston. The case is in Austin. I have a child. I'm a single mother. I just can't do it." And she does not take no for an answer. And she said, "Well, we really need you, and it won't take much time." I said, "Okay." And I remember thinking, what will come of this? You know, how am I going to do this? And it's funny, I live in Kingwood, which, you know, it's suburbia, but my neighbors, I remember going to them and saying, "I have to go to Austin. Can you keep Michael?" "Oh, yeah, we'd love to keep Michael." So it really took a village to do all this. And as the case progressed over the years, I would pay for my mother to fly down from Massachusetts. And so that I could do what needed to be done, took a lot of people in my life to help.
And so talk a little more about that case, about where it was. There was a scheduled execution date when you pick up the case.
Well, I had known about the case. It was big news when I was, I think, finishing law school. It was a woman who allegedly had killed a baby and buried the baby and gone off to Kansas or Missouri. And it had, you know, a lot of moving parts of prejudicial things. She had drawn a map, and they got the map from her lawyer, and so it was infamous. And that was in '94. Fast forward to, I think, 2005 or 6, I came on. She had an execution date. She had lost her final appeals, and she had a civil law firm that Sister Helen had gotten from lawyers from San Francisco and Pennsylvania, Morgan Lewis, but they needed local counsel. And that was what Sister Helen was working on. So she had an execution date, and they wanted me to come and argue that something. So what was funny was I went to Austin, and the firm, they did pay for like my hotel, and I was staying at the Stephen F. Austin. I've never stayed there in my life. They're like, oh yeah, order whatever you want. I got chicken soup and fruit. I'll never forget. Like, oh. And I forgot my code book. So I had my laptop and no code book, and I thought, well, let me look up what the statute is if we can even ask for a stay of execution. Get on Westlaw. I was like, okay, and I wrote it out on a yellow tablet. So we go to court the next day, and the victim's family was all there. I mean, this was their baby. We had some advocates for Kathy. It was a very packed courtroom, prosecutors, and me and Morgan Lewis. So they start debating, and, you know, I've been on the case a day, you know, I've met these people, and I remember the judge was very sweet, and he was, you know, listening to everything, and then I thought, well, nobody's told him he has got the authority to do this. So the prosecutor was talking, who was a great person, I just stood up and said, Judge, let me read you the statute. And I read him the statute off my yellow tablet. He was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to stay the execution. We're going to reset it for, I think it was 60 or 90 days. And I remember my friends from Morgan Lewis now, they were like, oh, wow, okay. I thought, yeah, I went old school. I quoted the law.
It is always a pretty incredible thing that happens most often in the death context, where you have these big firm corporate lawyers that live in luxury and aren't trench lawyers like us, and then they encounter these trench lawyers like you, yeah. And there's a bit of culture shock on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? Did that work for you in this case? Was it difficult to deal with?
You know, I can honestly say it was not difficult at all.
Because you're not being paid for
right.
this case, and in fact, you're ranked the pro bono lawyer of the year because of all of the hard work you put in, making sure that the right thing was done in this case.
Right.
And so did they, but they were, on the one hand, they're staying at the Four Seasons, and you're asking your neighbor to take care of your son. And neither's being paid, but there's certainly a difference.
Yes, but I can say that there was Molly Lane, George Cumming, and Michael Banks, 3 top litigators with a confidence in justice and a belief in doing what's right. I was impressed with everything they came at me with. I was impressed with, like, they could find these experts and they had the money to pay for them. And we had so many experts. And I think the difference is they weren't used to getting their butt kicked. Whereas we have sort of this, you know, I'm going to fight you, but a lot of times it's not going to end well. For them, most cases end pretty well. So they have a completely, you know, this spirit of we're not going to lose. And I remember I was always like the naysayer. I was like, well, I don't know about these findings. I don't know. Oh, this is great. And so I got a lot of like, oh, okay. And when we won because procedurally what happened was we had to file a successive writ, which you have to get past the Section 5 bar
There were 2 wins in this case.
Right, there were 2 wins.
First was in 2007.
Okay. So
Right?
Yes. That's 7. Right. I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
So the first win was you got a successive 11,071.
We did.
Writ.
And what that basically said was we could go forth and do the writ. So, but getting that agreement or that win from the Court of Criminal Appeals was fantastic. And Judge Price wrote this concurring opinion, which was almost like a roadmap to victory. Like, oh, he goes, well, if they can show this on the successive writ, and if this happens, and so we had the right then to do the second writ. And we had then a wonderful trial judge who let us have a battle of the experts. I mean, I'm talking a battle of experts. We had 11 experts. I think we had 6, they had 5. And it was spread out over a couple years because you can't get these people all in at the same time, and the prosecutors have different cases. And so I spent a lot of time traveling back and forth to Austin. And I love my civil friends, but they love conference calls. Oh, I get an email, we're having a conference call, log in. It's like, oh, I can remember being at Michael's trying to get my son's like Valentine project together and holding my thing on mute as I'm shopping, listening to the conference call. Okay, another conference call. These are things I'm not used to because we're like lone wolves, and they have big firm. They had interns. I mean, they were just incredible. You know, I did the Texas Help local council, but I mean, they found the experts, they paid the experts, they did their own Krabby test, dummy infant test. It was amazing. We filed our proposed findings in August of 2009. And the judge recommended relief be granted in May of 2012. So we waited for 2.5 years. And the civil firm kept saying, should we file a motion to make him rule more quickly? And I'm a firm believer in justice delayed is justice served. So I was like, let's not. And so there was that tension.
It's important. We've talked before about how it's very nice that when courts have the time to make the right decision. If a court needs to take the time, the court should take all the time it needs to make the correct decision.
That's true, and I will say what was interesting about Judge Wisser's findings were we had filed 65 pages of proposed findings. The state had filed, 65 pages of proposed findings. These were dense documents. And this is how I found out. It was really cool. I was at the public defender's office, and my old office called and said, hey, you got a certified letter here. I was like, oh, God, what? Who's sending me a certified letter? So I was with my husband, and I said, drive me down to my old office. And he drove me down. He goes, don't open it till you get down here. I thought I was being sued. I was like, oh, my God, why am I getting a certified letter? And I come down, and I see it from Travis County. I was like, why is Travis County sending me a certified letter? So I get in the car, and I open it. And I'm reading it, and I see, oh, God, it's the findings in Henderson's case. I didn't need this today. And I start flipping through, and it's only like 11 pages and lots of white space. And I was like, oh, what is he saying? And I get to the end, and he recommends relief be granted. I'm like, what? My hands started shaking. What? He's recommending relief be granted. I told my husband, pull over. So I make him pull over in downtown Houston so I can, not be moving. I was like, I have to call George. It was like the most shocking thing to see that. I never expected it. And those findings that Judge Wisser wrote, like you say, taking the time to do it right, were magnificent. They were brilliant legally, and in their spareness, they left no room for wiggles. This is how he saw it. But then a more even amazing thing happened is I called the DA. I talked to her, Dana Blasey, and she said, well, we're going to look at them. And then about a month later, she called me, and she's very nice person. She goes, well, I have good news for you. I said, what? She goes, we're going to recommend that the judge's findings be granted, not for the same reason, but that Kathy should get a new trial. I said, what? She goes, look, the minute they're signed, I'll send you a copy, or the minute they're stamped, I'll send you a copy. And she goes, I would like to call George. I said, you call George. You should call George. Because, like I said, we all went through this for years. So the DAs were awesome people. You know, they even, I'd like to say we built up a friendship with them. And it was amazing when I got the findings. They were signed by Rosemary Lemberg herself, the district attorney, recommending. They said, look, we don't believe your client's innocent, but we do believe she needs a new trial, a fair trial with the new science being utilized. And signed, Rosemary Lemberg, biggest day. And I thought, how cool is that? And then they told me later that she personally spoke with the parents of the complainant. And I thought, that is huge. That is justice. That is bigger than anything I'd ever seen. It's huge.
And what's the status of the retrial now?
Well, after those findings went, the Court of Criminal Appeals in December granted her a new trial. Said we're going to recommend relief.
And that's still pending?
So the retrial is pending. The civil law firm, Morgan Lewis, is still involved. They have a local trial attorney because I said, I'm not a trial attorney. My work is done. So
after years.
After years.
So I want to talk to you about something else. Something that's pending and something that's been a big part of your life for the past several months. But to get there, I want to start by talking about your marriage. So you're married to Ted Wood.
Right.
And on your first date, you did what?
I think I had a hearing for Kathy Henderson that day, and he lived in Austin, and I was going to meet him for the first time, and we went on a walk. And we walked for 6 hours on our first date. Talked all about the law, Constitution, Bruce Springsteen, all the things that matter in life.
And that's, you and Ted both share this passion about the law. Mm-hmm. And you walk and talk and you just develop ideas about the law together.
Yes.
And one day, you talk about something that I think every criminal lawyer in the state at some point just kind of looks at and is baffled by. These things that are afterthoughts to everyone, to prosecutors, to judges, to clerks, and most of all to defense attorneys. And it's court costs.
Yeah.
The CC. We write, how many times have we written CC on plea payment, plus
right.
CC? Okay, what's CC? It's always something different. And you and Ted would just talk about, what is this court cost?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he works for the Office of Court Administration, and so they work with judicial counsel, and they do a chart for court costs. He is a true legal policy wonk. You know, you ask him anything, and he finds the statute. He likes to look at the statute like the book. He doesn't want to look at it online. He wants to go get the book. And that is truly one of the things from that first date. We love the Constitution. We love the law. And
even what seems to be on its face the smallest, most insignificant.
Yes.
You got a life sentence and $600 in court costs.
Right.
Well, what are those court costs?
Right. And so I literally remember eating dinner one night, and he says, and I think a lot of those court costs are unconstitutional. I looked up, I said, what? And so he had been talking about court costs for a while, and I had been listening, but I really started talking to him, and really started talking to him. And I will say, backing up, my first job out of law school was at the prison. I worked for inmate legal services. So commissary, which is the inmates' money that mom and dad send them, is very important to inmates. It's one of the few choices in life they get to make. I mean, they don't get to decide where they're going to live. You can be moved at a moment's notice. All your stuff can be rifled through. You're going to work where they tell you. You're going to eat where they tell you. You're going to sleep when they tell you. But what you buy at commissary provides that little bit of joy. So that money is very important to inmates, and I know that. So court costs, they come in and take that money out of their commissary. And they take the money that mama and whoever else, wives, kids, send to their family members so that their family member can have a little joy, a little piece of goodness in this life of prison where they're paying for their crime. So it just pissed me off.
And you discovered that virtually no court in the entire state was following the law as to calculating these costs where they were made that follow these people around forever.
Right.
And that is still pending now. But
Yes,
you
it
have
is.
You have a big win in the 14th Court of Appeals that the state's PDR has been granted on, and now you're litigating at the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Yes. And it's fun because, and this is one of the joys of working for the public defender's office, I have resources I wouldn't have in private practice because this has taken a lot of time and a lot of people. If I was in private practice, they would beat you down. I mean, they keep filing petitions, all this, and I'm rejuvenated by it. Okay, bring it on, because I got 10 other appellate attorneys here that we can answer anything you throw at us. And I've been so overjoyed when, like, the Dallas Public Defender's Office called me about it. Some lawyers from Tyler called me about it. I had some other lawyers at Rusty Duncan talk to me about it.
And you trained public defenders here this year about that.
I did, and I was very excited, training you on court costs, because we can make a huge macro difference. Look, they're doing life. That's what the jury or the judge said. You're going to pay, give your life to the prison system. But they still have people who love them, who want them to have a little piece of joy, and that money shouldn't be taken unless
the government approves it.
Unless they prove it, and it's the appropriate amount. I'm not saying no one should pay court costs, but you're entitled to know what your costs are and have they been properly calculated. That's due process. We don't take someone's liberty without due process. We also don't take their property without due process. That's constitutional law at its very heart. The takings clause. Government can't do that. And so it is exciting because in this office, we can change the world for prisoners.
From the Harris County Public Defenders.
Yeah. From the Harris County Public Defender's Office, and Alex Bonin, our chief, who, on the very first case that I won, they didn't give me oral argument. So I filed a motion, I really need to come. I really need oral argument. They said, okay, come on this day. And I couldn't be there because I was going out of town for a wedding. And Alex rode by on his bicycle, rides by my office, and I tell him what happened. He gets off his bike, he said, I'll argue for you. Alex, you'll argue for me? It was awesome. I was in California at this wedding, and I kept calling people, how did it go? What did he say? How did it go? And they were like, it went great. And they taped it from someone's iPad, so I got to see the back of his head with the argument. And so that's been exciting because it's not just my issue, it's our entire office's issue. When our chief argues it and everyone is so excited, I mean, I think almost everyone in the appellate section has gotten some sort of win off it. And you know, this job can beat you down. Winning $234 in court costs, oh, that's good. That's good.
I want to talk a little about your work at the Court of Criminal Appeals. You worked for the Honorable Charlotte Baird at the court. How long did you do that?
2 years. I went from the prison to working for Judge Baird.
And what was your lasting impression of the Court of Criminal Appeals from your time with Judge Baird?
Well, there's a lot of things that resonate, but I remember my first week there, just trying to figure things out. I come from the prison, which nothing could be more different from working at the prison in a big warehouse with a cubicle to working at this very quiet Court of Criminal Appeals. And I had this big office with a window. But he came to me with what they call a shuck, and it was the file. He said, here, I'm going to need you to write the opinion on this. And I go, okay, well, how does it come out? And he drew up and he said, the law will dictate how it comes out. And I was like, okay. And that was my impression working for him, that he never had an opinion on what the result should be. Somehow, prior case law, the statutes, interpretation would dictate how it should turn out. And the other thing that resonated with me was I remember writing a dissenting opinion for him, with him, and it was a death penalty case, and I really felt strongly we were right, but we weren't at that time. 7 years later, the Supreme Court hears that case, Tenard versus Dretke. They reverse the Court of Criminal Appeals decision, and they cite Judge Baird's dissent. And I remember reading that and just crying and calling him up like at 7 in the morning. I hadn't seen him in years. I mean, we stayed in touch. I said, Judge Baird, we were right. I knew we were right then. And now the Supreme Court, the most conservative Supreme Court in the world, has said we were right. So that, that vindication years later. And another example, people always ask me, what's the best opinion you worked on? I worked on an opinion, it was a masterpiece. And it was a dissent because I felt that what they were doing was wrong. And I had evidence from the record. I mean, we had appendices. And Judge Baird came back from conference, and I said, he goes, we're not going to use that dissenting opinion. I said, why, Judge Baird? I worked very hard on it. He goes, it became the majority. And so what I had worked so hard on became just like a little 2-page non-issue. The guy gets his case considered because it was a dismissal issue. And so I wish I'd saved a copy of that. I don't. But that was unbelievable, that to think that I could write a dissent that all the other judges had already said they were going to vote the other way, and after they read the dissent that I and Judge Baird drafted, could change their minds. That was awesome. That was seeing the law and justice come together, like right there.
That's the way it should work.
Right. That's definitely the way it should work, that the law will dictate however anything comes out.
As we get near the end of this, I want to talk about how you came to be involved in TCDLA and what this organization is, what you've done for it, what it's done for you. What do you do for TCDLA right now?
I am on the board of directors, and I was on the Criminal Defense Lawyers Project committee. I'm off now. And I teach a lot of CLE. I love to do that. I always wanted to be a teacher when I was little. Whenever anyone asked me what I wanted for Christmas, I wanted a chalkboard. Because I want to be a teacher. But I joined TCDLA in 1995. I think I got licensed November 94. And I joined the next year. So I've been a member almost 20 years. It has given me a huge network of friends, of knowledgeable people who you can call. I mean, people like David Botsford and David Moore and people that are big time that I've met through TCDLA. And, I have a case like this. Like, I had a recusal motion once, my first one many years ago. And I emailed David Botsford. Within, 5 minutes, I had, the best recusal motion I've ever seen in my life. I was like, oh, this is awesome. So it's a support. It's a group of like-minded individuals where we can come together. When we go to the courthouse, you know, a lot of times we're like the outsiders. You know, I think being in the public defender's office has lessened that because we're in the courthouse. But typically, it's the judges and the DAs. They have lunch together. They're all together. So we come in and, you know, we're the fingers in the dike of, you know, injustice. But here you come, everybody thinks the same. Everybody wants the same. They want fairness. They want justice. They want people represented well. Nobody wants to see an innocent person go to prison. You know, and like the Michael Morton case, that, you know, Jerry Goldstein from San Antonio went up and helped for free. I mean, people will come and help where they see an injustice. What other group does that? I don't know. But this has been my greatest blessing. You know, Rusty Duncan. You know, I'm a big court history fan, and, you know, I knew all about Rusty Duncan, his pictures at the court. I would look at it all the time. I talked to people who knew him. It's a very important part of my life. Right over my desk, you know, I have a TCDLA poster that I bought a couple years ago, and I had it framed. 40 years of TCDLA. And I mean, so every day when I look at it, that's what I see, Lady Justice and TCDLA. 'Cause that's what we're all about, justice.
I want to finish by asking you to tell us a little bit about the most important person in your life, Michael.
Oh. Well, it's
Tell us about Michael Mark.
Michael Mark Jr. He's 12, and he gets what we do. He gets it because he has lived it. I was a single mother up until like when he was a baby, till he was 9. So he spent nights at the office, weekends at the office, seeing what we do. He has not had me at a lot of important events because of what I do, you know, the job. You know, I can't come to your school play. I'm sorry, I've got to work. I have to do this. But he has great sympathy for people. He recognizes ambiguity and gray, and, well, they did something wrong. He goes, they're not a bad person. They made some bad choices. He understands that, and I love that he sees what I do as having value. He's come to court with me and sat there. I remember one time I had a big argument in New Orleans, and I was kind of nervous. My lady was charged with carjacking. It was a tough case, and I was sitting at a table like this, and I glanced over, and he's in his little suit, and he goes, "This is great." You know, court begins. So he has been my best buddy, and being a criminal defense attorney, I think, and being a part of TCDLA and having a network has given me experience, referrals. I mean, my business was good because of the people I met here. I mean, he's been to Rusty Duncan many times. He's coming tonight. So he knows who Rusty Duncan is. So yeah, he is. I'm really glad that he knows what I do is important. It's not meaningless. He understands it's meaningful. And I don't know what he'll be. He tells me he must be a police officer. So you can be whatever you want. Just, you know, be kind, be understanding, and always care about what's right. So we'll see. I'm hoping it's a phase.
Well, Jane,